knight g3, targeting the rook, or trapping the rook, I should say, on e2. Abasov sacks the rook. With rook takes bishop, I take, he takes, and now I play rook b5. Abasov takes on c3, and now I play my 41st move, which is queen to e3 here. And now the dust starts to settle. The queens have to be traded, because if you move away, you lose the bishop on c3. So the queens come off the board, and now Abasov plays d4. I trade, and I go king f1. Now, one of the interesting things here is the computer does not give white a huge advantage here. It actually thinks it's very small. But during the game, I thought I was already winning because of the dead horse on g6. Now, what do I mean by a dead horse? This horse on g6 is going to be pinned for eternity. I'll give you a sample line. Let's say black with bishop b2 here. I play something like, let's say I go rook to c5, we get c3 here, and now I can play this move rook to a5, or actually, sorry, wrong order, sorry. I play something like knight to e2 here, black with c3, and now I can play this move knight to d4, cutting off the bishop from moving to e6. If black goes king g8, now I can play rook to b8, king h7, and now I can start to slowly improve my position here, because black simply is running out of moves. After bishop c1 and rook a8, pressuring the pawn, black cannot activate this knight as it's pinned for the rest of the game. Now, it's weird because the computer is actually giving white only a small edge, but I assume this is due to low depth, frankly. I guess I'll leave it as is. Probably due to low depth, but at this point, black can't ever move the knight. If you ever go f6, for example, probably here I can even move my knight to b5, go after the pawns on c3 and a3, and this knight is just a huge issue because of the pin. Now, again, I'm using the weak engine, so it's probably giving the evaluations a little bit lower than it should be, especially because having looked a little bit on-site after the game, I know that this was very, very good for white. But the point in this position, as we get back to the game, is that this knight on g6 being passive means that black really is struggling to try and save the game. So Abasov plays h4, I go knight to e2. Now, apparently knight f5 is a little bit better, potentially, but I play knight to e2. Here, Abasov plays bishop e3, and now things start to fall apart. Abasov still could have played bishop b2, creating his own wooden shield on b2 with the idea of c3, but after knight to f4, let's say black goes c3, and now a move like rook b4, black is in all kinds of trouble here with this massive pin, threats towards the bishop and the pawn on this diagonal, and computer already says that white is winning. So Abasov plays bishop e3, but now I go rook a5. And the reason I play rook a5 here is I want to win this pawn on a3 and start pushing p. If I can start pushing this a pawn up the board, I assume that black will simply not be able to stop the pawn with the two b's and the lack of a horse being active. So Abasov goes king g8 here. Now I take the pawn, he takes, I make the check, he blocks, and I go a4. Now, it's amazing the computer is not saying this is completely winning, because already here I thought with the outside pawn just pushing p up the board and the knight being pinned on the back rank, I assume this is already very close to winning. And I think my opponent Abasov also thought the same thing, which is why he blunders with this move f5. Now, apparently the computer thinks after bishop e3, it's still a game. I thought after a5, g5, something like a6, I was close to winning. Say king g7, and something like bishop e4. And apparently after knight e6, the show goes on, which is kind of hard to believe, honestly, as I look at this position. But apparently black is still very much in the game. Now, of course, both myself and my opponent, we thought that it was already very close to over. His body language was not positive. I also thought that I was completely winning with this a-pawn going off the board. But the computer, being a 3,500 level player, shows how difficult it is to play such positions. So after a4, Abasov goes f5, trying to bring the king to the center of the board right away. But now I play the move knight to d4. Pressuring the pawn on f5, and he goes h3. We swap the juicers, and I go king f2. He checks, and now I go king f3. He checks, and I go king g2. Now, basically, the reason I'm winning here is because the pawn on f5 is falling, but I can still also just keep pushing p with this a-pawn going up the board. Abasov plays f4, and now I find the very precise move bishop to f5 here, trying to get rid of one of these bishops. Abasov checks, and now I go king f1, and he has to trade the bishops. If he plays bishop f6, which is another move, I can take, and I can play this knight check on e6. The knight is pinned, and after king h7, rook takes f8, I win the game. So Abasov here decides to trade the bishop. Sorry, he plays bishop takes f5. I take, he goes bishop g5, and now after this move a5, Abasov resigns the game, as I'm just going to be pushing p, turning this pawn into a queen, and winning the game. One sample line, which is very beautiful, is let's say black plays